Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Dr. Sarah Howorth, and I would like to welcome you to the UMaine Artificial Intelligence webinar series. I am a member of the UMaine AI Steering Committee and a faculty in the College of Education and Human Development. My research specializes in special education, applied behavior analysis, and inclusive educational practices, all aligned with technology tools. And it primarily focuses on evidence-based instructional strategies for all students, particularly those with significant emotional and intellectual disabilities. We have Nicole Davis here as our feature speaker, and she is the Emerging Technology Digital Specialist for the Maine Department of Education, where she has been supporting the integration of artificial intelligence into classrooms across the state of Maine for the past 2.5 years. And with over 20 years of experience as a math and science educator in Maine and North Carolina, Nicole has a deep understanding of the diverse needs of students and educators. Through her role, she has led numerous presentations and workshops statewide, equipping Maine schools with the tools and strategies needed to effectively implement AI in education across various grade levels. She resides in Damariscotta with her dog Luna and enjoys spending time in nature. We also have with us visiting Dr. Matthew Marino, and he is a professor of exceptional education at the University of Central Florida. He's known for his significant contributions to STEM education for students with disabilities, and his research emphasizes technology-enhanced learning environments, universal design for learning, and effective interventions that support diverse learners in STEM fields. Dr. Marino is recognized nationally for advancing instructional practices that enable teachers to deliver accessible, engaging, and rigorous STEM education, and to improve academic and post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Sarah. Very, very nice introduction. You're hired.
Thanks. So I just have a few housekeeping to remind our attendees that if you have a question while either Nicole or Matthew are presenting or during our conversation here, if you would like to jump in and ask your question, just post it in the Q&A and I will be looking for it, and Mindy and Dina will also be helping me monitor that chat. So that's it. So I would like to invite Nicole to start, and she's going to be walking us through the guidance that has been developed for Maine educators. And Dr. Marino is also going to be involved in the discussion and particularly focusing on how what Maine is doing is reflective of what's happening in other states as well. So take it away, Nicole.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm going to share with you in just a second the AI guidance. However, I want to give you a little bit of background behind it. So we're developing it over, I would say, the last year. It was released in the end of January. Through that process, and I would say over the last 2.5 years, we've been doing professional development all around the state of Maine. And if you've seen me present, you've probably seen some of the stuff that went into the guidance. So all of that we were working through went into the guidance. So there was a point where I was like, oh, we got to get this guidance out. We have to get this guidance out. But at the same time, I knew that the information was out there. So I felt a little bit better about that. When we were actually developing it, I have a team of 18, the Learning Through Technology team at the Maine Department of Education, that helped me develop this. But what was really important to us that this document was about Maine educators. And so we asked for Maine educator input within the guidance. There's a lot of points where educators can contribute and be a part of it, and districts can be a part of it, so that it is really a document for Maine educators. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully you're seeing the Maine AI roadmap. We used a tool called Genially in order to create this, which gives interactivity. So when you click on this, you can see any interactive elements. And basically this first screen kind of tells you about the navigation throughout, and that you can hit the next buttons, but you also have one over here. And then on every screen, we have a menu. So we're going to go ahead and just look at a couple of these pieces. So it's split into 4 sections: the overview, the teaching and the learning, the leadership, and additional support. And throughout the guidance, it's really based in AI literacy. And the first part of AI literacy is that you understand that how AI works. And you don't have to have, you know, the deep knowledge that maybe a computer scientist would have, but you should have some knowledge. So the overview helps with that. And it goes through with AI explains, ethics in AI, AI foundations. And so this first part is really just the Maine Department of Education's philosophy and thinking about using these tools and that they're not going away and that we should be using them with the idea that digital citizenship is a strong part of that. We also have an update section here because this is going to be a document that is updated as things change, because things do change. This piece is literally that first part of the AI guidance or AI literacy that I just said, that you have to know how it works. So this is a place where you can click on these different pop-ups, you have videos, there's articles, and you can educate yourself about how generative AI works. There's a timeline, because that's the other piece of this, is that you have to realize, like, where is AI and how is it a part of our lives? So all of that is here. We do have an ethics and AI piece as well. And with that, we have something that we do well in education, which is acronyms, and that is to keep the human in the loop. And so we have come up with this acronym of HUMAIN. And it's really the strong ethical and responsible use behind AI, where before you even start, you're pausing, you're saying, should I use AI? And then you're a part of the process the whole entire time. U stands for utilize, where you're thinking about those prompts and how you can use them as a thought partner versus prompting and posting, which we know is what our students are sometimes doing. So how do we teach them to use it effectively? M stands for monitor, for accuracy and bias, and knowing that those exist and they're a part of it. A stands for authenticate. So how am I using this? How am I a part of the process? Is it my work? Is it a work that is appropriate to use? And then N stands for note, meaning, do I need to disclose that I've used AI? Do I need to reflect on it? Do I need to cite it? And then the last part of this section is, so it goes in, each one of these has a piece of like that human, and it goes in, this is our framework for prompting. It has different information around accuracy and bias so that you can have information there. Here's that authenticate piece, and then some best practices around reflection and noting whether you used it. And then the last piece around this first section is really our belief that you can't do AI without computer science and digital citizenship. They all kind of meld in together. AI, if you have the computer science foundations, then you know how it works. If you have the digital citizenship, then you can use it responsibly. And so again, there's more resources there. So that is the overview part. The other, I would say the meat of this document lies within the teaching and the learning and the leadership. And so as educators come in, yes, it's important that they understand how AI works, but a lot of our educators are asking, well, what do I do with this? And ultimately the question is how do I get it so my kids don't cheat, right? And so within this section, we start right off with why. So this is not something that's going away. So it's important to say, well, why should I even do this? Why should I teach it? And a lot of that has to do with our students' futures, right? This is something that they will be using in the future, and they need to know how to use it. And that's across the board. I would say that's PK-12, but it also needs to be all the way up into, college and universities. And then kind of thinking about that entry point for our teachers and educators of, okay, I'm ready to do this, but I'm not sure where to start. If you've done anything with technology, you're familiar with the SAMR model, which is substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And so if a teacher is like, where do I start? They can click on here and there's suggested tools, again, videos, things like that they can check out to say, this is a place that I can start thinking about AI, at least for my own use. I think there's a lot of misconception that if I'm a teacher that is, I've dove into AI and I'm doing technology in my classroom and I'm doing all of that, that I always sit in this redefinition place. And that's just not true. Some things will still be substitution. Some things will be modification. And so thinking about our use of technology and AI very purposely. So this is the big question, right? Around cheating and students using AI. So these are some activities that we've put in here for educators and conversations, because that really is where it needs to start. And conversations need to happen at multiple levels. So it needs to be happening with your students. It needs to be happening with the teachers. It needs to be happening across your district. And I would argue even in our communities, this conversation needs to happen. And so this is a chart from Matt Miller, and then Matt Miller and Holly Clark discuss this on a great podcast that's linked here. But it's the idea that we have this continuum. So we have stuff that is literally prompt and post, and we've seen it as educators, all the way down to what we've been doing for years, which is student created. And so the question is what is cheating? And I think we could all agree that this top one, we don't want students prompting and then posting. We don't want it to do their work for them. But is there a place along this continuum that is okay? And that might be different for different assignments. It might be different for different classes, but the conversation needs to happen. And so this really helps to facilitate that. The other piece that helps to facilitate that is this activity right here, where these are different scenarios. And as a class or as teachers or as a district, you could talk about these and talk about what's not acceptable or acceptable. And then you can move them around based on that conversation that you have. And there's other resources to help facilitate that within your classroom. But it's the conversation is so important that it needs to be happening, like I said, everywhere. There's other resources here about, other responses, handwritten assignments, AI detectives, draft back tools or detectors. And again, engaging in that conversation and talking about it and educating ourselves about what these tools are, as far as AI detectors, what they are and what they do, so that way we can choose and make an educated decision on whether or not we want to use them. And then, of course, our the better way to respond of creating a culture around sharing when AI is used, teaching students how to use AI ethically, modeling using it ethically, having clear expectations, and having students reflect on their work. So this is really just lots and lots of resources for our educators. So if you're lesson planning, you've got lots of tools and tips for that. One thing that has been really interesting that I've heard is that after teachers have used some of these tools for a little bit, I'm hearing, oh, they're like, well, that's lame. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing with AI? And oftentimes what I hear is, well, I'm creating lessons with AI. Well, if you're an 8-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year educator and you're using AI to create a lesson, yeah, it's going to be lame, right? Because we have all of that pedagogy. We know what we're doing. We probably have a lesson, somewhere in our pocket somewhere. So I challenge people to really think about, what can AI do for you? If I was still in the classroom with my science classroom, I wouldn't want it to create the lesson for me. What I would want it to do is I would want it to give me 5 misconceptions around this topic, and how do I address those? So really pushing it to think about that with our use of it. There's pieces around accessibility and really thinking about what are the resources at the Maine Department of Education. We try to really have a UDL lens where it's universal design for learning. So how can we break down barriers for all learners? And again, that is something that is not just for PK-12, that's all learners. And really, we're hoping to have this be a place with that AI lens that you can get other resources from the Department of Education, because there are so many great resources that I would encourage you to go on our website and find them, because there's a lot of great things that you can use for free. There's stuff on student engagement, that AI literacy piece explained, assessment and feedback. This other piece is a call to Maine educators, because I want this to be made up of everything from Maine educators. So a place where if you're doing cool stuff, we want to broadcast it. We want to tell people about it, so that if I'm teaching in, Presque Isle, I can be like, oh, look at what that educator did in Falmouth, and I might want to use that. That's super important, and we know it's valuable. The other big piece on this page is this clear expectation piece. So I would argue that if you are just dipping your toe in AI and you're starting to say, like, what do I do with this? No matter what, with your students, give them expectations. So that might be, if you're just starting, it might be to say, guys, we're not using AI. That's perfectly okay. But you are going to then work towards, how can I get some of these other pieces into my classroom eventually? So it might be that you have assignments where it's full AI, or assignments where it's AI assisted. It's not it's not 5 all of the time. It's going to be appropriate for what the assignment is, what you're doing. But at the very least, if you're just dipping your toe in now, give your students some expectations so they know what's expected of them. And then the last part of this section is really thinking about, as a future learner, what do our students need? What is it they're going to need, not just with AI, but technology, with digital citizenship, computer science, everything. What is it that they're going to need? And this is a really cool place that I used AI. I took the 21st century learning standards. I took the computer science learning standards, and I took the ISTE, both the teacher and educator, or student and educator one, and I threw them all into AI, and I said, what are the commonalities between these? And then with that and other input from others, we've come up with each of these. This one gives us, so for each one of these, if you click on them, it will give you kind of that definition, and then it'll give you activities throughout. So this is just, here's some core skills: digital citizenship, computer science, AI ready. Some of these have links where you can have the lesson, so that those activities, you have an idea of what you can do in your classroom to be a digital leader. And then the other part of this page is our Maine resources. So again, this will be built out with Maine educators of, here are AI lessons that you can do in your classroom. This one is our computer science hub, which is, again, Maine lessons. These were all created by Maine educators, whether it's through Moose or through the CS grant. This was a cohort that was made, and all of these lessons are from that. Digital citizenship, this has been gathered and curated so that you have those in your classroom. And then cybersecurity is something else that we're going to build out. And then that is the last part of the teaching and learning. And then our
super comprehensive, Nicole. So thank you so much for putting that together and sharing that. I'll let you know that I was trying to prepare for this and go through your website, ahead of time. and you were able to get through and explain more in 20 minutes than I was able to do in 2 hours. So I'm really impressed with all the resources that are there. Can you talk a little bit more about how your community of practice is going to work? You mentioned reaching out to folks from Presque Isle and sharing information from other places. Is that going to be a spot that's dedicated within this website where folks can go to see what people are doing in different places?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right here in AI in Maine schools, we actually have a map, and this map needs to be built out even more because I have been over to 100 different schools and 50 SAUs throughout Maine doing this work. And if you've seen me present, you've seen some of this AI guidance, if not the majority of it in some sense. And so each one of these is either a place that we've presented. So a place like East Grand, we went and we did a session called Fear to Inspiration. And this is the information that they got. That was submitted by me, but then there's also things like Portland Public Schools, where this was submitted by Courtney Graffius, who's the technology integrator coordinator there. And she's given us different things that they've done. She's given their academic honesty policy. Even now, this needs to be updated because she just recently printed the human graphic, and it's in every single one of their classrooms. And so this is just a place that you can start and say, you know, what is a district that looks like me, and what are they doing? And again, I have some stuff that this needs to be updated. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, as June comes and the schools wind down, I'll have a little bit of time to do some of that work to update this. Great question.
Yeah, super helpful. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the leadership one too.
Yeah.
We do have one quick question before you
Yep.
jump into leadership in the Q&A. One of the attendees has asked, I see students are substituting putting questions into a search engine with putting the same question into generative AI. The problem, of course, is they are looking for the answer without any steps related to choosing appropriate sources. What are your thoughts on addressing this beyond explaining that this isn't a good use of AI?
So I would practice this with it, model it. So let's put it into the the Google, put it in Google and see what happens. Let's put it in an AI system, maybe a couple different AI systems, and let's evaluate the output. So that one, you're also getting that piece of evaluating sources and thinking like, well, is this accurate? So when kids know like this could hallucinate, meaning make stuff up, when are you going to trust that AI? You always have to keep that human in the loop and check in to say, is this right? Whereas Google, it's not going to generate something new. It's going to give you sources so that you can figure it out. And I think ultimately just practice around that it's gonna matter. I don't know if Matt has something else to add to that.
I actually have an interesting perspective. So I'm kind of a nerd and I like to watch, podcasts with CEOs from all these AI companies. And so that's kind of my morning routine is look at the newest one. And I was watching one a couple days ago by Sam Altman, and he had a pretty astute observation. The observation was that kids in high school are no longer going to Google. They're going to places like OpenAI as their web browser.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, that is certainly a fundamental shift in how they're using browsers. And now I'm starting to think, what are the implications for this for us as educators? So I have no answers, but I thought that was a really interesting perspective that I will put out there for comment.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider is many of the search engines now, when you, especially Google, if you put in your search bar, your question or whatever, what's the most popular baby name or something, you get an AI generated summary of what the
Anyway,
search comes back. So
sure.
it's almost like, and then large language models are combing the internet in a similar way. So it's almost like AI is teaching itself. It gets very complicated, but I do like your idea, Nicole, of just modeling it with students and showing them that this is a shift and how technology tools are being made available to the public, and then demonstrating with them and walking through with them as kind of that guide on the side of helping them think through um, their problem solving.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're trying to create critical thinkers, right? And so
Right.
if they
Right.
see both piece and decide like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense that this AI will help, but so they can decide when to use it and when not to. Um,
And do you have a sense, Nicole, of what percentage of the schools in Maine you predict would adopt this resource as a training mechanism?
so great question. So we are in the state of Maine, we are locally controlled. So I can't say you have to use this. And so really it's schools that have reached out, schools that have checked in and have learned that this is here. We hope to create a course around it because like you said, just digging through it and kind of looking at it on your own, there is a lot of information here.
Sure.
And it's quite dense. So how do we make it available so that the resource is something that educators can use? So that's our hopes very soon. I have an outline and I'm working on that. So that's kind of the next steps with this. But right now it's really just educators or districts reaching out and checking in. Like I said, I've been to over 100 schools in Maine and 50 SAUs. So the word's getting out there.
Great. Well, so nationally, 51% of teachers are identifying lack of training in AI as a primary reason that they're either not using it or they're choosing not to support it at the school level. And so I think it's fabulous to have a resource like this. Okay, I'm going to let you get back to
All
leadership.
right. All right. So AI for leadership. So just like the teaching and learning, we start with the why. Why now? Why not wait? The role of leaders, so that if you are an leader, and we use the word leader instead of administration because there are going to be leaders in this space that are not administrators. So, why should we do this now as leaders? Then, just like the human, we came up with a framework for policy and thinking about how do you do this at your school, and it's routes. So, what kind of routes can you make for AI in your district? And the first is to establish an accountability group, thinking about who's part of that group, what are going to be the roles and responsibilities. And then O stands for oversight, thinking about what is that group going to do. So are they going to help create policies? Are they going to be helping to pilot tools, things like that? O stands for opportunity because 40% of our headlines are negative. So a lot of the times when we think AI, it is, cheating and plagiarism. So how do we take opportunities with this and really thinking about building a strong foundation around AI literacy and what approaches are we going to use to really capitalize on the opportunity of AI? T is for transparency, where that has both things around data as well as how do we share this and make sure that everybody is, all of our stakeholders are informed. And then S is around sustainability, where how do we think about school budgets and tools and things like that moving forward? And so each one of these has just more information. I love this, and it's in every single one of my presentations, that we have to manage the overwhelm and giving the permission to say that it's okay to start small or with immediate issues. It's okay to make mistakes because guess what? You're going to make mistakes. It's changing so quickly. And then it's also okay to change things along the way because you're going to have to. Again, it's moving so quickly. So that's in every one of my presentations. Here's that oversight piece. There's a toolbox with different policies. This is a thought along, what policies do you make? Is it that big P policy we're changing at the school board level, or is it, procedures and protocols within the classrooms? So thinking about what kind of guidance you're giving there to your district. Here's opportunity. Transparency with, again, just different pieces there that people can click on and get more information. And then sustainability. And then this kind of wraps up our All of our frameworks, where the robot was within that human framework, where it's the prompting piece. So I really talk about robot as being the learning. Human is with the ethics, the teaching, and then roots is that community and policy piece. So it all goes together so that it's all part of it. It's all part of ethical and responsible use. This is a piece around healthy tech, because we know we're having conversations right now around screen times and phones and things like that. So how do you create this culture just within your school? And I bring up a lot of the times with AI, I think about cell phones right now and the conversations we're having and the frustrations we're having around it, and how we wish that when these came out and we started kind of moving along with them, that we were teaching kids about them and how to use them, and that they're addictive and all those things. So let's know that with AI, that same thing's happening. So let's teach them about it. Let's think about and be mindful that this is kind of the same situation of this brand new technology that's moving fast. How do we show kids how to use it, even if we're fumbling along as we're doing it? This is a page that I kind of nerd out about, which is student and data privacy. I think the reason for this is because teachers often get at the beginning of the year, they just get that tiny little, like, here's this video, watch it now, right? And who wants to watch that video at the beginning of the year? No one, because you want to be fixing your classroom. And so I love this place because it's a place where teachers can really dig in to these regulations and think about FERPA, COPA, the DPAs that districts have to sign, so that they understand why you can use some tools and you can't. A lot of districts are tightening up right now, and they're really looking at the tools they use, and they're saying, no, you can't use that. And teachers are feeling like, oh, this is just another barrier for my teaching. But if we really understand data privacy and what we're trying to do, then you can then search for the tools and work with the technology people to say, this is both safe for my students and it's going to be helpful in my classroom. And so that is the leadership piece. And then the last little piece is the additional support, which I will be quick with. It's got a, glossary, so different words and things that you might be interested in. Of course, as things change, we'll add to that. We've got frequently asked questions. Some of these sections are pieces that I want to build out as well. And then we've got the map where districts can add to it by submitting things. We've also got just navigating tools in a rapidly changing landscape. We've got this as an interactive PD, as well as the human, robot, and roots in a PDF or Google Doc. And then we've got these 4 common tools. We don't promote tools from the DOE, but these are the ones that kind of seem to pop up, and we've linked their terms of service, privacy policies, and then whether they're FERPA or COPA. And then just lastly, some common resources that might be helpful. And then a thank you. And so that is our AI guidance.
That is really comprehensive. Thank you, Nicole, for sharing that. I
Absolutely.
wonder, a lot of the work I've been doing over the last year is around helping administrators use AI to become more effective consumers of data. So doing data analysis at the school district level. Do you have any resources related to that within your website?
Not for there's a little bit of like how to use it as an administrator. Ultimately, because there's a ton here that we have.
There is a ton, no question about that.
I literally have a long list of things that I want to add, which is
Okay.
also why we want to do a course. And I've told my team is that there's really 2 courses here, right? There's a course that's all around like how to use it as an educator, how to facilitate it with students, but there's also that leadership piece of how do we implement policy? How do I use this with the data analysis? How do I use this as a district leader to really help my district as well as create those policies around it?
Good point. And so where are you as a state in terms of a AI policy guidance document? Do you have one that you've adopted? I know, Sarah, you were working on that with a committee for a while, right? Is that still going?
I think that this is what we have so far, what
Okay,
Nicole just presented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll notice the name, it's AI Guidance Toolkit.
right,
So when you think about AI guidance, and I think when we look at the other states, right, AI guidance is really you must do this. Maine is a local control state, so that
right.
this is really what it says is guidance. It's a toolkit to figure out what you're doing at the district level, and so this is to help with that. Versus we're not going to mandate and say you must do this or you can't use that or you have to do this. That's just the way our state works.
Right. Unless
Excellent.
unless we make a law about it, and I don't see that happening.
Mm.
You know, how does that differ, Matt, than what you're seeing in Florida and across in other states that you've worked with through CITL?
Yeah, so every state's on its own journey. I'll say that, right? Like I have seen a few states that like Georgia, for example, has a pretty locked down policy. Um, and Washington State has a policy, but it's not as detailed. And so I think depending on the government that you have um, in your state and the level of regulation you're going to see, that they're highly variable, I guess would be my politically appropriate response.
Okay. So then I guess my other question, for both of you to kind of riff on is Nicole has described this guidance for K through 12 educators. How do you see this reflective in higher ed for faculty? And because as I was looking at it, I thought I'm going to share this with all the faculty I know because a lot of this is also appropriate.
Yeah, I think if you think about like human and the acronym human, like that's just ethical and responsible use. I'm hoping everybody does that. It doesn't matter whether you are PK, all the way up to higher ed, or you're somebody that's in, the field of whatever career you're choosing. I hope that we're figuring out how to use this ethically and responsibly.
And I don't know that it's appropriate to have a K-12 AI policy, quite honestly, because I feel that from a developmental perspective, in K6, you have a different type of learning that's happening, right? You have a fundamental learning that's happening. Whereas in secondary school, you have students who are taking the information and then learning how to adapt it and analyze it critically, looking at primary source documents, et cetera. And so I almost feel like we should have different policies based on the grade level where the teaching is occurring. And then when you get into post-secondary, I'd be interested to hear, Sarah, where are you going with that? Like what's the bottom line you're looking for?
Well, I'm exploring, right? Because in our colleague conversations amongst ourselves at lunch, at the coffee bar, we're all sharing incidents of, you can't believe what this kid tried to do with AI, and I'm sure those are also happening at the high school and middle school level, right? Whereas a lot of people in education have some tools in their teaching toolkit to guide their undergraduate students mostly through that process. But other content areas, maybe in biology or computer science or engineering, you name it, nursing, they might not necessarily know, like, what do I do? And a theme that's come up in many conversations I've had with administration is that, everybody's concerned about plagiarism, similar to what Nicole had mentioned. And there really isn't a way to, I mean, Nicole shared some like AI checkers, but there really isn't a way without being a detective yourself to figure out if a student is using AI any more than you can find out if they Googled it, right? It's all about how good they are covering it up. right?
Right.
So I guess faculty are looking for tools that they can use as well as K through 12 teachers was the point I was trying to make. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm just curious if what's happening at the faculty level in your conversations.
There's still a wide variability in responses. So you have early adopters like myself and other colleagues who think that it has tremendous possibility in many different courses, right? So if I'm teaching a high school biology class and I want to look at protein synthesis, well, using AI, you can do an in-depth exploration of protein synthesis that you wouldn't be able to do without it, right? So I really think adopting it in certain content areas is really beneficial to not only the students, but also the teachers, because it allows you as a teacher to be able to identify pieces that the students wouldn't normally get to in your classroom, right?
Right.
Um, but moving beyond that, as a college professor, I think that we still have faculty who have never used it, or maybe have used it a couple times only hesitantly,
Yeah.
and so I have a really hard time having conversations with them.
So
Exactly.
I will say with AI detectors, we have to be careful of them because they are biased against non-native English learners as well as neurodivergent, and usually unreliable as well. So we have to be careful of that. In this situation, I also like to bring up my colleague that I work with, Kate Meyer. She's out of MDI, and she was an MLTI ambassador with me, which is an exchange kind of with your school. And when she went back to the classroom, she decided, I'm going to be all in. I'm going to use AI with my students. And Kate, I usually will be like, hey, try this, or, check out this thing. And she's constantly having conversations with her kids. She is an English teacher. But I think this applies with anything, is that she's always bringing up the topics. Like, do you think I used AI for this? Do you think it's ethical? I often ask, like, do you have problems with cheating with AI? And she's like, no, I don't, because we're so open and honest about how we use it. And I've showed them how to use it. So it's interesting, even right now. So she's talked a lot with her students lately about the environment, and kind of the real big environmental impact that AI has. And so she told me the other day that her kids literally, like, if somebody's using AI, they'll be like, what are you doing with that? Have you thought out your prompt? Because we want to make sure it's ethical, because otherwise it's hurting the environment. So that she's
That's
literally
fantastic.
created this culture that is, they're critically thinking about their use of AI, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So I guess if anybody I just want to remind if anybody wants to jump in the Q&A and ask any questions. I know some of you who are in here, and I know you've got questions because we've had conversations. So please don't make me call you out personally. If you want to drop your idea, even if it's just something to pontificate on in the Q&A, please do so. But in the meantime, I have just I have a couple, I have a list. If that's, we still have time, right? Of questions that I just kind of wanted to put out there for both of you. I know personalized learning and that theme always comes up when we talk about the potential benefits and challenges of using AI with students. What do each of you think are the potential benefits and challenges of using AI for personalized learning in diverse classrooms?
I think there's
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's some interesting schools actually happening with this, where the kids are learning with AI in the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's all hands-on, and they're doing real life problems, which is awesome. I would love to teach at a school like that, and just and I've heard like scores have gone up and things like that. And when we think about like that piece of like, well, I don't think it has anything to do with the AI in the morning. I think it's the hands-on that they get to do in the afternoon, right? So I think anytime personalized learning can open up opportunities like that, it's perfect. I also think, I think there's two pieces to this. You have the personalized learning where you're like sitting with an AI and you're learning along that. But I also think there's the personalized piece of what teachers can do. So gamification is a big jam of mine. I love it. And it's hard, right? It's hard to gamify your classroom, and it shouldn't be done all the time, but it's hard to do like escape rooms or things like that. And as soon as I've kind of integrated AI into creating escape rooms and showing people how to do that, all of a sudden it becomes easier. And they're like, well, I could do that in their classroom. So that personalization that way, and creating experiences for students is, I think it's game changing.
Yeah, and I'll say that there are certain subject areas where um, not only gamification, but AI is also leading to personalization. So, for example, I have a former doc student, now Dr. Kenneth Holman, who recently finished his dissertation, and he was looking at gamification versus gamification with AI, and found that the AI was able to really personalize learning for kids related to conceptual understanding of fractions in grades 4 through 6. And so after I saw that, as someone who loved to gamify before that, once I saw how the benefits came in from adding the AI piece, I said, this is going to completely change the way we think about educating students, especially in subjects that are historically difficult for students who are neurodivergent, Sarah, like you were talking about, in those areas where teachers sometimes have a hard time customizing and personalizing the lesson plan, but AI can do it almost seamlessly and differentiate among every kid in your class as long as they've got their personal device. So that's my thought. You're muted, Sarah.
That's fantastic. I just unmuted myself. Okay, so I've got another question. I see there was a quick question. Yes, if people want professional learning for their district, they can contact Nicole directly, and she's put her um, uh, email in the chat. It's just nicole.davis@maine.gov. And then another question I have for you guys while we're waiting for more Q&A to come in is, how do you think AI can assist teachers in identifying and addressing learning gaps in their students, both at the K through 12 level and the higher ed level?
Well, at the analytics level, you could use something like data analyst GPT. So I've had teachers use that in the past on different assessment items, right? If you've got an assessment that's going to look at specific constructs, and this is one of my kind of pet peeves around state testing, is that we have these state tests that the students take in the spring, and then by the time you get the results, there's no remedial instruction, there's no benefit to the students. So why the heck are they taking those tests? If we could take that information we get from the test and then immediately come up with a plan for the students, and AI can do that for us, I think that would be a brilliant way to utilize something that otherwise is a big waste of time, in my opinion.
Well said. I think when we're using those data analytic tools, those are fantastic. We just want to make sure that they are FERPA and COPA and that we're not putting student information in. But you can also do that in ways, even if you don't have paid versions, where you could label the students and things like that. So just be aware of that. I'm going to bring this back to student engagement. We have a real problem with like student engagement right now. And I think, I talked a little bit earlier about screen time and phones and things like that. Is how can we make it so that our students are more engaged, and can we use AI to help facilitate that process of either gamifying your classroom or bringing in things that students enjoy or like. And so if you have a kid that is into NASCAR, You can say, well, how do I make this math problem all around NASCAR? Or bringing in real world situations that kids will be more engaged in. So how do I, create this thing? You can ask AI to do that and help that lesson planning piece and bring that into your classroom. And I think the more engaged our students are, they're like, we're not going to create those learning gaps as much.
Fantastic. Another question I have for you guys is, what role do you think AI might play in facilitating cross-content integration and interdisciplinary learning experiences? For example, how could an AI tool support like a science, math, language arts project? Like how might you use that? I know I'm asking you some hard questions. Sorry.
Well, so I think that's fundamentally at the core of what makes AI so powerful, Sarah. The interdisciplinary collaborative opportunities that come through problem-based learning. And so I would love to see more of that actually at the high school level. I think that's something that, at least in the Florida schools, is really, even though they say it's interdisciplinary, problem-based learning, it's typically taught in one classroom, right? And so you can say we're going to have these other people in here, but you don't really have experts from those other areas. And I think that's an area where AI can actually create a bridge that wouldn't otherwise be there.
I would
Nicole,
agree.
you're nodding your head, so I
Yeah.
believe you drank the Kool-Aid. Tell us about what you think.
Well, and I think sometimes too, like it's this interesting dynamic, right? We want to have the interdisciplinary and we encourage it. And there are schools that it's not there. It takes the communication, the schedule doesn't work. And so I think creating that bridge of how can I be interdisciplinary, but also be in my classroom. So if I'm introducing a topic and I have the same vocabulary that can also be done in another classroom, that's all going to be beneficial to our students. I was listening to a podcast the other day too, and they were talking about impact first learning, which is, I think, basically backwards design of PBL, but kids choosing something that's going to make an impact. And so what is it that they want to do? And how cool would it be to plug something like that into AI and then say, how do all of my concepts in this math class relate? How can I pull in the social studies concepts so that it is interdisciplinary and then the kids have a huge part of it. And again, that goes back to the student engagement piece of they're going to be much more engaged if they're a part of it and it's something that they want to do. And AI can do that. We can ask and say, how can I pull these things in?
Yeah, and those interdisciplinary problems I think, are a way more exciting way to learn than your traditional rote memorization class,
Same.
right?
Yeah, it's a way to break down those silos, right? That we often close our classroom doors and that's it, right? Uh,
Exactly.
so another question I have for you is, I don't know about Florida, but Maine is often, depending on which data source you look at, discussed as the most rural state in the nation, just based on population density, because almost half of our state is
Trees.
forested. Yeah. Um, uh, like commercial forests, uh, forest farms. So what challenges do you think rural schools in Maine are facing related to infrastructure and in implementing this in every classroom in Maine?
Great question. We have a ton of support around infrastructure. So just like my job is the emerging technology digital specialist, we have an infrastructure and cyber safety specialist. And so he goes out to schools and checks in. And again, all of these resources at the Maine Department of Education are free. And so we've been working over the last several years to make sure that infrastructure is in place and help schools. I think, we have we've targeted places too of like, okay, Washington County, for example, how can we get us there? How can we develop and work with the people that are in that county to develop professional development and get AI resources or get whatever it is into that county and have that good quality professional development. So we've found different organizations around the state that are willing to help with that. And again, Jim Chassie is our infrastructure person. He goes into different schools. I think ultimately the struggle we have is that we want to come into all these schools and not necessarily all the schools know us as a resource.
Thank you.
So I'd like to ask a follow-up question related to that, just because in a former life, I was in a very rural place. And so I was in Washington State for a while as a teacher educator, and I was an educator in Vermont before that. And I'll tell you, in the rural towns that we were in, bandwidth was a real problem in schools. And I wonder, are you still struggling? Are you struggling with that currently?
Yeah. I don't know as much as Jim would know, but I do know that I've been to a lot of rural schools. Yesterday I was in Millinocket. And as I'm having teachers, because one of the big things that we do is we get on these tools and we try them out. And
Sure.
so I have anywhere from, sometimes it's a group of 10. Yesterday, I think it was 20, 25 that are on these tools and there isn't an issue. And so as far as like using the tools that way, I haven't had any issues, but it's something I would have to check in. I think we're pretty good about having those things in place and having that as a resource. And like I said, Jim has been all around the state, just like I have.
Well, that's great. I'm so happy to hear that's been resolved. And, it's been 10 years. So
Yeah.
back in the old day,
Yeah.
it was a struggle.
So we do have one other questions last comment, and I want to be mindful of our time at 12:56. My colleague, Dr. Crystal Mary, is asking or saying, she said, I highly support the use of AI in the classroom and we use it to varying degrees. However, a handful of students each semester are still over-reliant at times on AI in areas that require academic-based reading and writing. With this in mind, and since AI detectors are not always accurate and can be biased, as you noted, I have been reviewing submissions informally this semester using the version history of Google Docs to check students' extent of AI use. Are there any areas of exploration in this area that you all have done for college level courses or secondary education?
So Brisk for education, Brisk for teachers, also has a great AI like background history check. So that's a tool that you can use as well. I think all of these are part of a story, right? So we have this kid that maybe has used AI that's over reliant, or maybe they've right out cheated, or maybe they've copied and pasted things. So when we have that, asking ourselves, well, what's going on in this case? Why are they choosing to do this? And ultimately, I think showing them too, in a way, like I think it still has to be, we're not in a place where it can be punitive yet because we don't have something that can 100% detect you used AI this way, but a learning experience where you can say, well, why did you use this? Or, how did you use it, where they're reflecting on their work. It might even be like, I know you used AI, or it looks like you might have used AI. Can you tell me how you did that? And then having that conversation and going a little bit deeper there. And I think some of those conversations come back to clear expectations. So you can have those those good conversations if you set up the expectation in the first place of no, you can't use AI, or yes, you can use some, but you've got to tell me how, or all of that.
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's a great summary.
One more comment that's just come in. Franklin County just completed upgrading to fiber to every home in fall 2024.
Wow, that's great.
Go Franklin County, finally.
Yeah, good job.
Well, I want to make sure we have 1 minute left. I want to make sure I'm mindful of both of your times because I know you're very busy people. And I want to express my gratitude to each of you. I hope we can keep this conversation going, Nicole.
Yeah,
I would love to have you come and talk to some of my classes. I know you have a busy schedule.
Absolutely.
And Matthew, I know I will see and talk to you soon because we talk almost weekly, I think now. So I
it's
appreciate
true.
your extra time doing this today, and I know you're very busy, so thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for
Great.
having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And I just, before we go, I would be remiss of saying, please consider attending our UMaine AI conference on June 13th. It's going to be in Orono at the Collins Center, and we're going to have panels from education as well as industry and leadership, as well as poster presentations of what's going on here in Maine and across the New England region. So please consider that. And this will be recorded if you wanted to show it to one of your colleagues um, to so they can learn about this guidance. It will be on our UMaine AI website once the recording has processed. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
Enjoy
you.
you.
the
Have a
rest
great
of
day.
your day.
You too.